I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, about a year. Well, as you can tell by the intro of the video, the build is finished. I've finished it about a year ago, and it's been working great. It's been working great. I'm really happy with the result. It's not perfect. It's not as good as other examples I'll show you, but it's still, I'm pretty proud with the result I've got. Full disclaimer, before I start talking about the building process and what I've done with the whole thing, the stuff, the whole build was pretty much inspired by Ungrady over on the Linus Tech Tips forums. He put out an amazing, he did an amazing job on his own NES PC, but he also put a whole list of the parts of what he used, what tools he used to cut things, and what he did, his whole process, and even with a great selection of not videos but pictures, lots and lots of pictures of his progress from pretty much start to finish. It's actually really great. I'll try to put remember to put the link into the description with all the details. The pictures you need to go on his I think it's a Photo Bucket account. They don't show up on the forum posts anymore, but they're still there. They're still great, and highly recommend checking his build out. If you're thinking of doing this on your own too, I would highly recommend checking his build out instead of mine. But let's get that out of the way. I don't know yet if I'm going to do this video into a multi-part series or just do a big ass half-hour or more hour-long video, but I guess we'll see. A lot of the videos that you'll see are you might see various degrees of quality. A lot of the things was filmed last year on my old camera, and now I have a new one, and it's nice. It's if you guys are curious, it's a Sony A6500 with right now a Sigma 19mm. It's pretty nice. The only reason why I wanted to do this PC was because I wanted to have something small and light, either to have in the living room or as a LAN PC to bring over to a friend's house and get to game on. Because what I have right now is a big tower, and it's quite cumbersome and not really easy to transport over to a friend's house, and also I don't always have access to a car. This is really useful when you can just put in your backpack or in your bag and carrying around with you. Can I talk? I don't know if I can talk. Can I speak? Having something this form factor is really great for a living room PC, like an HD PC, and since it's a PC, you can just plug in any style of controller. Like if it's a Sony, Nintendo, Xbox, you can plug in anything. Third-party controllers or Microsoft Sidewinders if you guys want. But since it's a PC, plug in all types and sorts of controllers. This is great for emulation, and have four-player LANs of Smash Bros or whatever, Mario Party, or emulators. The possibilities are great. So far, what I've used it for are little indie games, since Steam supports pretty much any type of controller now. I had a PS4 controller, a PS3 controller, and 2 Xbox 360 controllers plugged in, and it just worked flawlessly. It's really great. It's really fun. I'm so happy. I knew going through that this was going to be a challenge. I knew that this wasn't going to be just opening up the NES, putting a motherboard in, and plugging everything in, and voila, yeah, I've got a PC in the living room. No. I knew this would take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of fiddling around with the case or other tools that I don't have, so I'm using other tools, and it's something. The easiest part about all of this was actually just buying the PC components. I knew going through that this would be pretty much a lightweight or like mid-range or entry-level PC, but like as I'll show with I guess benchmarks, this can play anything. It's actually really great. I saw other people doing this style of PC in like Super Nintendos or N64s, but I highly don't recommend doing something like that. Those systems are a lot smaller and thinner, and as you'll see with either Ungreedy's build or mine, you need some room. You do actually need some room to work with, and N64s and Super Nintendos are quite small. They're quite small, or you won't be able to fit at least a GPU. Like you might pull off an APU type system, a system with an APU, but a system with a dedicated graphic card, I would highly doubt it in a Super Nintendo or N64. Like the building process took about 3 months. Planning wise, I guess another month or two. So in total, I started about May of last year, so May 2017, and then ended about end of August 2017. That was a good couple months. It wasn't just cutting everything open. I had a full-time job also, so I only really had time or energy to do this on the weekends. So it took a while. And also, I got some parts. Some of the parts are quite varied. I got some really early on, or that I already had with me. The hard drive mostly, but I didn't get everything all at the same time. I also really wanted to do an APU type system, just because of AMD APUs are quite they perform quite well. They don't require that much power, and they don't, since there's only one component that is heating up in there. Thermals wouldn't be as much of an issue with either a CPU and a graphics card. But I was a little bit impatient, but also AMD didn't ship their APUs until almost 6 or 8 months later. So I'm with the build with the pieces I have right now, I'm still quite happy. Some of them were a hassle to get, but I'll explain that later. For the parts, I knew that I wanted something fairly high spec. I wanted to play a lot of varying levels of games, and also I also wanted this PC to be a bit future-proof, if that is even possible. But I didn't want something that can pull off 30 FPS in this AAA game, and then next year it'll pull off maybe 15. So I want something fairly high spec that I wouldn't have any problems running anything. The only part that I had laying around with me already was a 250 gig hard drive, which I pulled out of an old laptop that someone gave to me to repair, which I couldn't repair, so I got a free hard drive. And then the case, the NES itself, I got from a friend that had one laying around, so that wasn't he gave it to me for $10. So I was super happy, and I knew I wanted. I didn't really want a full pay for a full system and then have to tear it apart. Just $10 for just a bare bones NES was actually really great. So I knew I wanted a CPU with at least 4 threads, and looking around in the Intel side with the Pentium series, They recently, at least 2 years ago, they released CPUs, Pentium CPUs with 2 cores and 4 threads like the i3s, and with fairly high clocks. So this is actually really great for gaming. And the one I chose was the G4600, which actually was about 100 something Canadian dollars. It's not too much, but actually a great little CPU. Doesn't really run that hot, and 3.6 gigahertz, I believe, if I can remember correctly, is just enough speed to run any game. I also stuck with the stock cooler that the CPU came with. Runs fine, and in the NES case itself, it's actually fairly quiet. I was actually pretty impressed. When planning out which pieces I wanted, a friend of mine also was interested in building his own NES PC, and he actually went with an Intel 2500 and i5 Sandy Bridge from the Sandy Bridge generation. That also was a really good CPU. The only problem is trying to find a good motherboard, and I was lucky. I got a motherboard off of eBay for $60, but for the good socket, for the correct socket. But the thing is, it was an H100 series, and those are for the Skylake generation CPUs, and I have a Kaby Lake CPU. So I actually had to call a friend to borrow his processor, update the BIOS on my motherboard, and then swap out the CPUs again just to get a working motherboard. It was a hassle, but it works. It worked, and now I have a working motherboard. For the RAM, RAM prices started ramping up in 2017, and I knew that I didn't want to spend that much money. I wanted to keep the system fairly cheap, on the cheap side, and I'm also cheap, so yeah. So I went with a 4 gig stick of DDR4 memory. If it was DDR3, I have some already lying around that I could just stick in, but it uses DDR4, so I had to buy I had to buy new sticks. And surprisingly, 4 gigs is still enough to run any game. I was quite surprised. I tested out multiple games, and they all launched, and they all ran correctly, and I was actually really impressed. For the GPU, you have to go with a low-profile GPU. I decided to go with the GTX 1050 since it has really decent 1080p performance. Is really small and runs fairly cool. Also, the GPU runs off of the motherboard power, so there's no extra 6 or 8 pin power connectors that you need to plug in. It runs straight off the motherboard power, and this is great since for the power supply that you need to kind of use, you're not forced to get this, but it actually works really well with the tight, really constrained PCs like this one. It's an HDPLEX power supply. Those are kind of looks like the Pico PSUs that you see online, but this one's a higher wattage. This can go up to 180 watts, and so it's enough power to run a good, decent, powerful CPU and a GPU. I just cracked my finger. And running a couple hard drives. But you can't plug the power supply, that kind of power supply, directly to the wall, so you have to get a laptop power supply to plug into the HDPLEX power supply, and then you can get power for your system. So it's expensive. It's a lot to get try find and get, but it works out in the end. And I found you kind of need, for the laptop power supplies, you need to get those Alienware or Dell high performance, high wattage power supplies. I got not a refurb, it's a third-party one that I got on eBay for $50. I'll post a picture somewhere. I don't know if they're still available, but for $50, it was one of the cheapest ones I could find. I don't think they're cheap enough to burst into flames, but I think they're fine for the little system that I have here. And if you look into Ungrady's NES build, you'll see that he also used an HDPLEX power supply, but they have a bigger one. Like he has a 300 watt model, I believe. You don't need that much for the system, like a small system like this one. 180 watts is more than enough to power the whole thing. Other various parts that I've used for the build is like cheap fan splitters to plug in multiple fans on one fan header, because the motherboard only has two fan headers, one for the CPU and one for the case fans. So I got some fan splitters. I got some cheap 60mm fans to stick on top of the vent. There's an air vent on top of the NES case. Stuck both fans there as an intake to have some air to the system, and some power switches to plug onto the motherboard power headers thing, and to have power and reset switches on the case. Also got some decals, some from a guy on eBay that produces some really high quality decals that they really look like actual, like legit. Like they have the correct font, correct spacing, correct like everything, and they're actually, it really is pretty. I'll try to put links into the description with those. And to paint the whole thing, I used some black Plasti Dip. But also I wouldn't recommend Plasti Dip because of how fragile it is. It feels really cool, like the rubbery finish is really nice, but it scratches up so easily that it's not really worth it. And for the base of the NES, because you have to shave off the base, I use some sheet of polycarbonate. It's really strong and really keeps the system stay like strong and stable. And to stick everything together, I used some I think it's I used this Bondo glass. Again, this is really hard to use. Might recommend using like some sort of epoxy or something, but this works too. Now, for the building process, I'll try to explain as much as I can, but a lot of it I tried to film as much as possible too, but sometimes either I forgot the camera or was lazy then and didn't bring the camera. But some parts of the video, some parts will have no video, but that's just how it is. So let's go. I'll stop talking for now, and let's start building the thing. Yeah, cool.